taking a course on international trade and supply chain management. What we're going to look now is maybe build the foundation for the course. What is supply chain? What is international supply chain? And what is logistics? Where did it start from? Its historical perspective, and where is it going? Like all academic courses, we're going to have a snapshot of what's being done yesterday and what's being done today, but they're going to be new and improved ways. So I'm going to introduce the concepts to you, the definitions, and this will be some of the overall framework for what we'll be using for the rest of this course work. It's going to be exciting. This will be the first foundation blocks, what we'll be studying the rest of the class. So to kind of give us a roadmap for the course today is we'll look at first definitions. What is logistics? What is supply chain? And what is international logistics? Then some of the historical developments, because it's kind of important to know where we were to where we're going to today. Then look at the evolution of logistics. Then maybe how logistics and supply chain interact with each other. Some of the key elements or the components of international logistics, and probably the reason we're taking this course is, hey, what is the economic importance of logistics? How do you make money? What are the risks? And if we're taking risk, what will the rewards be? These foundations or building blocks will kind of help us with the questions we're going to attack in later chapters to know what to do, when to do it, how to do it, why to do it, so we can have the right questions and have our companies, our clients, or our associates help us get the right answer. Let's begin. One of the key things we want to look at is what is supply chain management? But maybe before we go into supply chain management, the question is, what is logistics? Logistics for this course is the part of the supply chain process that plans, maybe implements, and or controls the efficient and the effective forward and reverse flow and storage of goods, services, and related information between points of origin, such as a manufacturing facility, and the points of consumption, such as maybe a retail outlet like Walmart, in order to meet customer requirements like you and me. It's the physical movement of goods. Now, for supply chain, I don't want to use a lot of formal definitions because a lot of people have different opinions, but for a baseline for us, let's look at what the Council of Supply Chain Management of Professionals, how they define it. And they defined it, and it's kind of a wordy definition, but supply chain management encompasses the planning and the management of all the activities involved in sourcing, domestically, overseas, the procurement and the conversion, and all logistic management activities. By definition then, logistics is a subset of supply chain. And really importantly, it also includes the coordination and the collaboration with your channel partners. And channel partners have been key in international business and growth over the past 2 decades, which can be our suppliers, intermediaries or middlemen, dealers, distributors, agents, or hired third-party service providers that take care of logistics, warehousing, and our customers. In essence, the supply chain management integrates the supply and the demand function with and across companies. This is what we're going to use as supply chain management. And what I like to think of is, in international business, if you're in Taipei, Taiwan, and you're going to buy a bright yellow convertible Ford Mustang, in the demand function here, that dealership could be a joint venture. It could be a wholly owned subsidiary of Ford Motor Company. It could be a franchise. They're going to have to do advertising and probably hire advertising agents. They're going to physically have to buy the land. They're going to have to warehouse a certain amount of cars. They're probably going to have some regional warehousing facility, maybe in Thailand, to support the business in Taiwan. We're going to have to get support and supplies from Ford Motor Company based out of Detroit. And it goes all the way back into possibly a rubber tree plantation in southern Brazil. This is going to provide the raw materials, the rubber, for the components and parts such as tires. They'll be sold to a wholesaler who will be sold to the manufacturers, which could be maybe Goodyear or Goodrich, whoever supplies. All of these components will need to be coordinated. There'll have to be partnerships. There's going to be contracts signed, legal issues. There's going to be currency issues. There's going to be trade terms that are going to be have to negotiated. There's going to be payment terms. How am I going to get paid? All of this will encompass supply chain and what we talk about in this course. Now let's look at international logistics, which is a little bit different than domestic logistics. A lot of other variables to consider. It's also the process of planning, implementing, and controlling the flow and storage of goods and services and related information. And trust me, in international business, this related information is critical from a point of origin, such as a manufacturing facility, to the point of consumption, but in a different country. By being in a different country, you have different paperwork requirements, different legal issues, different currencies, different government regulations, taxes, duties. All of these will affect how you supply goods and services to a foreign market. Now, the term logistics or international logistics is based on the physical movement of goods. But our modern term of logistics really comes from the military, such as Alexander the Great to General Patton, and to how the U.S. military moves its products, its services, its goods, its personnel around the world in a orderly, controlled fashion. Business logistics then includes all of these activities that are related to the physical movement of our goods and services upstream and downstream, and all the related paperwork. And trust me, we'll talk about paperwork a little later in the course. Now, the historical development takes on many phases. We'll call it a long, long time ago, or the early slow days. How to get a product from point A to point B in one piece and as cheap as possible. Then, because of competition, if I'm making money with my product, competition's going to come up. There was a move towards speed to get to the market quicker. Then there was an emphasis on customer satisfaction. And finally, people taking advantage of supply chain or logistics strategically. This strategic advantage would basically separate the successful companies from the unsuccessful ones. We'll look at each one of these in piece by piece because it's important to know where we were to understand where we're going to be going. Now let's look at some of the historical development, where logistics and supply chain came from. First, we'll look at what we call the early slow days. A lot of people say that globalization is a recent phenomenon. I don't want to get caught up in the terminology, but people have been doing international trade for thousands of years, such as this simple diagram here. These are ancient trade routes that archaeologists have found showing and proving that international trade has been going on forever. The first international logistics experts were maybe traders on the Silk Road. It was a well-traveled trade route. It's been in use probably over 3,000 years, and it stretched from Europe all the way to the Asian peninsula. And it passed through the Middle East. As trade grew, they had to supply logistics. And with logistics, they had to provide cities. They had to have management, coordination, cooperation. And these early logistics experts were concerned primarily with ensuring that their goods, could be horses, livestock, could be a beautiful pot at a Suzhou, China, were arriving in good condition to their final destination at the lowest possible cost. Really simple. Well, following World War II, logistics began to incorporate a lot of the techniques that the military used. And this is an incredible change. If we're going to have to get from Shanghai, China to Europe, we're going to have places to feed the horses or camels. We're going to have food supply. We're going to have places where people can sleep and feel secure. So logistics began to refer to not only just the movement of goods, but also to the sales, the procurement of supplies, and the management of supplier and customer relationships. And these would last for thousands of years. Okay, now we're not so concerned about making sure just our product gets from place A to place B at the lowest cost possible and in one piece. We're now moving towards speed. There's more competition. The introduction of containers, also known as boxes, in the late 1950s had a revolutionary effect on international trade, in particularly ocean trade. It was the single largest change around the world. What we had now is boxes that were standardized 20 foot, maybe 40 foot, that were used the same in Long Beach, New York, Sao Paulo, Brazil, Shanghai, China, Hong Kong, anywhere in the world. We had a standardized way of packaging things. Even though two customers have never met, they knew how to prepare because they knew things would be in a container. This really started in the late 50s and basically had widespread adoption. It made everything easier, made shipping much more efficient as well as, and more importantly, cheaper and faster. And in the 1970s, new companies like FedEx, DHL, UPS, they introduced a time-defined air shipping service. They gained a large market share of domestic shipments. Air shipments were becoming cheaper. And by the 1980s, international air shipments grew as costs came down and the number of destinations increased. I could no longer just have to ship to Chicago or New York. I could go straight to London, Paris. We can go anywhere in the world. These multiple locations were able to provide suppliers, American companies, opportunities to sell their products and services quickly to new markets. Air transport became cost competitive with ocean transport for many products, especially sensitive products like electronics or high value products like watches, where you were worried that if they were in an ocean environment, they could be damaged. So we're no longer at just making sure it gets delivered in a good piece, but we want to make sure it gets there fast. And that's what competition brought about. We had to move towards speed. Now we move from just getting things there faster, because now everybody can do it. How do we get customer satisfaction? Now, customer satisfaction, one of those scary business terms, because customer satisfaction to one person is quite a bit different than the other. Some people want great customer service. Some people want the best bang for your buck or value. Others want high quality. Others want, hey, I just want a good price. I want a warranty or a guarantee. So be careful when you use customer satisfaction. But in context of this class, let me explain what I mean by customer satisfaction. In the 1980s, here in the United States, we started to experience really high interest rates that led a lot of companies to need to want to reduce their inventory levels. In the past, we tried to bring as much product in and fill our warehouses full of stock to meet our customer needs. But with high interest rates, most people realized, wow, that's dollar bills, that's cash that is sitting in my warehouses that could be spent on other parts of our business, expanding it, administration, salaries, sales, marketing, research and development. So having large inventories
was pretty much not a good idea and was understood throughout the industry. At the same time, the pressure of higher interest rates really helped people to focus their attention on reducing inventory levels. And there's a few inventory management techniques or philosophies that we created to reduce these inventory costs or these inventory levels. And those techniques are included basically just in time, or a lot of times we hear is JIT, or material requirement planning, MRP, or manufacturer's resource planning, or MRP2, and distribution resource planning, DRP. There are a lot of other techniques or philosophies, but we're going to focus on these four for the class. Now, what is just in time? By definition, this isn't a product or a service. It's really a philosophy. And like all philosophies, it has to be top down. But just in time manufacturing is simply, as stated here, a process that plans for parts to arrive on the assembly line just before they are needed. The goal of this technique is to reduce or eliminate the need for any type of inventory. Now, it also includes the delivery of parts to the assembly plant just before they are needed, and the delivery of finished goods just as the retail store is running out. JIT, or just in time, has become part of standard operations management practices in most manufacturing facilities. It involves a risk if the supply chain is disrupted, as production may have shut down due to lack of materials. Now, this became really critical because just in time meant we needed strategic relationships. We had set channel partners because if I was a just in time manufacturer or a supplier, I would need my sub suppliers to be strategic channel partners. This became critical. Likewise, my customers also had to be just in time. So all of us in the supply chain would be working from the same philosophy. Now, these strategic relationships kept bids from coming out because every time you would bid out a product, you would have to spend a lot of time finding out if a particular supplier could actually meet those requirements and could do it for the long haul. This process worked great because everyone was tied together. However, things like the current economic crisis really can put a damage to this type of supply chain. A lot of Japanese companies, particularly Toyota, is seen as some of the fathers of just-in-time inventory management. But some of their sub-suppliers went out of business during the current world economic crisis. When they go out of business, it's going to take a lot of time to requalify a new supplier. So just-in-time is the ideal philosophy for most management and operations management companies throughout the world. However, it's not perfect. Right now, I put this little picture up here to give you some of the different subcategories on how basically you eliminate waste. That's all just in time is trying to do. It's trying to keep us from wasting money and materials in the operations process. Now, just in time is a philosophy, an important one, but we also have computer-based tools that we can use today, such as MRP, or Materials Requirement Planning, and Manufacturing Resource Planning, or MRP2, in our manufacturing plants. And then also Distribution Resource Planning, or DRP, which all tie together. MRP and MRP2 are basically tools, computer-based tools or programs that allow the manufacturing firms, the supplier, to determine what to produce or order from its sub-suppliers, raw materials for example, and in which quantity in function of their sales forecast and maybe some pending customer orders. It tries to integrate what the manufacturer needs from its sub-suppliers as well as the demand side from the sales force. And it also integrates in the finance part of the company. So it tries to integrate all the key pieces, finance, sales, and manufacturing, in a computer-based format. So you can provide goods in just in time. Then there's also distribution resource planning, DRP, it's a tool that allows a retail firm to determine what to order from its suppliers, in which quantity, and when, and in function of what it sells to its retail customers. These tools are really dependent on the reliability and the efficiencies of delivering relatively small shipments. It makes everything quicker, more efficient, and eventually more effective if it is well organized and well planned. Now let's look at DRP, Distribution Resource Planning. Think of when we go to our local grocery store, maybe say the Albertsons just down the street from UCI. We've bought all our healthy foods, we've got them in our grocery cart, and we go up to the checkout and we see that delicious looking Hershey's chocolate bar. I know most of you don't sit there and purchase them on demand. Well, with my family, my children, we have public begging. Please, please give me a chocolate bar. It could be the last chocolate bar in the world. Well, we eventually buy one. Well, when we scan that product, boop, at the local Albertsons, it goes into their computer system. They look and they notice that at Albertsons store number 1 in Irvine, California, they have bought a Hershey chocolate bar. The local store looks at their stocking levels, their stocking point, and they'll realize that, they just bought a Hershey bar at store number 1, at register number 1. We need to restock. They bring more Hershey bars from the back. At the same time, when they bring them from the back, they realize, hey, we need to order more product from our regional distribution center, maybe in Central California. That Central California gets this computer message saying, boop, Irvine, store number 1, needs more Hershey bars. So it takes it out of its warehouse and delivers them to Irvine, store number 1. They also have a stocking point at that warehouse. Boop, they realize that they've been supplying the whole western United States and they're running out of Hershey bars. They notify their strategic channel partner, Hershey's in Pennsylvania, hey, we're low on Hershey bars. Please make more. And this feeds right into their MRP2 system. Hershey's now needs to plan to manufacture more chocolate bars for Albertsons, the company, for the Western region, so they can supply to Irvine, store number 1. This is how these all integrate together. When we look at logistics and supply chain management in context of the overall supply chain, let's look at how firms interact. In essence, international logistics management has really become a strategic advantage for the firms that are capable of containing costs of their shipping, such as increased fuel cost, shipping times. Also, those who are able to provide visibility in the supply chain, or just the ability to determine where a shipment is at any particular time or any moment, and be able to communicate that efficiently, effectively to their customers and clients. Also, strategically be able to provide a reliable and a dependable delivery, something we just count on. Think of how much shipment from Amazon we just expect to be on time. We expect them to perform. Also, ensuring the security of the goods while they're in transit. In this post 9/11 world, security has become a big issue. And more importantly, is it sustainable? A lot of times we are really interested in low-cost alternatives. But if there's not enough profit for the company, are they really sustainable? Will there be a long-term channel partner? Will they be strategically involved with us? If we look back, at just-in-time management, we talk about how important these strategic partnerships within the supply chain are. Now, when we look at logistics and supply chain, for the purposes of this course, and my perspective, logistics is a subset of supply chain, where supply chain is the overall supply function, subcontractors, raw materials, demand function, retailers, wholesalers, and end consumers. However, there are different theories. The textbook even talks about 3 different views of the relationship between logistics and supply chain. I think it's pretty obvious that the inclusionist view, where logistics is a subset of supply chain management, is the most appropriate in today's world. However, there are other views, and you can look at the evolutionist or even the intersectionist. You make your own decision, but for all intents and purposes in this class, we're going to be looking at logistics, the physical movement of goods and services up and down the supply chain, as a subset of supply chain management. Okay? I hope you don't have a problem with that. If you have your own opinions, please contact me. I'd love to discuss it more with you. Now, we look at the executive boardrooms, the C-level positions. Supply chain management is really strategic. Supply chain management is inherently global. It's basically where the executives or firms are buying or making decisions about purchases from foreign suppliers or how they're going to supply their foreign customers. It's much more complex than domestic logistics and has a lot more environmental issues you have to be involved with, such as international insurance is much more complex. International means of payment are more involved. The terms of trade are more complicated. The relationships are more complex. Being involved in supply chain management is being involved in the strategic part of a company. Do I open a factory in every country in South America? Do I open a factory in the largest country, Brazil? Or do I open it in the two largest? How do I take advantage of trade blocks? How do I take advantage of trade agreements and contracts? How do I take into consideration language issues? Although there's a trade agreement between Brazil and Argentina, we're dealing with Portuguese and Spanish. All of these issues are critical. What we're going to do in this course is look at how we look at things from the 3,000 foot level. What decisions we'll make on our contracts, our payment terms, our trade terms, how we're going to enter a foreign market, how we're going to manufacture abroad, how we're going to get through customs, how we're going to package our goods. Those are all strategic decisions. In each of the chapters we're going to cover here are going to really give you the questions to ask your team members, to ask your clients, to ask your managers, to be involved in the strategic decisions of a company. Now, obviously, there's more tactical levels like transportation, warehouse design, storage planning, load building, or even inventory modeling. Even operationally, how should we route our trucks? What train route should we use? How do we optimize our packaging? How do we pick the right CRM or customer relationship management program or the right MRP or MRP2 program? How do we schedule our production? Should be one shift, two shifts, or three shifts? And how do we maintain everything and plan it? All of these are critically important. For this course, though, we're going to be focusing more on the overall supply chain, making the right decisions, making the effective decisions. Now, here's a company. Let's say it's a company here in California. And as you can see by this diagram, it has domestic customers. Could be LA County, could be Orange County, could be San Diego County, could be Northern California, could be the West Coast, could even include the East Coast. They may even have foreign customers. These foreign customers could be as simple as part of the North American Free Trade Agreement between Canada, United States, and Mexico, or it could be even more complex overseas in Europe or Asia or South America, Australia or Africa. And our customers could have even more customers. So already things are getting complex. As we talked about, domestic logistics, supporting domestic customers is already pretty difficult. When we look at the supply side, we have the same issues. We can have domestic suppliers. Like the Porter cluster theory, all these customers are surrounding each other to try to supply this company. And they may even have tier 2 or tier 3 suppliers themselves, providing raw materials in the process. And these suppliers, both domestic, also could be foreign. So there's a lot of different variables, different elements that are needed. The environment in which we use international logistics just is extremely different than our domestic environment. So I give you this diagram because I think it's really important that you separate domestic logistics from international logistics. On terminology alone, things can be perceived differently. FOB in the United States is different than the international commercial term or Incoterm for FOB. We want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples. So try to separate your departments out between domestic and international logistics, because the decisions regarding international transportation alone are really a lot more complicated than domestic. A truck coming from the United States to Mexico has to deal with multiple government agencies, different road conditions, different types of gasoline or petrol. The number of middlemen or intermediaries involved can be extensive. And as you know, like the telephone game as a child, the message gets less and less clear the farther you away from the source. And there's just a lot of risk involved and hazards in just international transportation. For example, if I'm going to send my goods overseas to Japan, how many times does my goods get shaken around in the container? Usually in ocean shipments, a container can be moved 6 directions at one time. So it's exposed to water, exposed to heat, then cold, humidity. The insurance is more complex. How we get paid is different. And the international trade terms used are very specific. These 3 letters, FOB, CIF, X-Works, those 3 letters have responsibilities, both legal and financial, that both the exporter and importer need to know about. So having a department focused on domestic logistics is critical, but also having one focused on international logistics is equally important if you're going to go in the international marketplace. You don't want to be making mistakes with clients or suppliers who are thousands of miles away. Now, you can see that international trade, international logistics have a financial or economic impact on the United States alone. Logistics consumes a substantial portion of our gross domestic product, or GDP. However, American businesses have spent close to $1.5 trillion on just domestic logistics activities, which is really about 10% of our GDP. Now, as you can see by the graph here, our amount of logistics as part of our GDP is somewhat decreasing. In 1982, it was around 16.2%. In 2004, it got down to as low as 8.5%. In 2007, though, it bounced back. It's about 10.1%, but that was due really to the rising energy costs. And what will it be in the future? If America is going to be part of the international boom, we have a weaker US dollar today, but President Obama has stated he's going to invest in the infrastructure to help the remaining manufacturing facilities export internationally. So logistics is an important part of our economic existence. Now in the US, we've been able to increase our efficiencies on logistics by developing just-in-time inventory management techniques. Manufacturing, resource planning, and other methods have helped us reduce our inventories to make us a little more efficient, such as containerization and eventually the deregulation of our domestic transportation system. But let's think of the world at large, the economic impact on how international logistics affects the supply chain. Now, to be honest, it's pretty hard to estimate this, but I want you to get the impact is this is big business. Probably 15% of the total international trade volume, or let's say $2 trillion. $2 trillion is big money. That's why you see people investing in large infrastructure projects. That's why you see people talking about enlarging the Panama Canal. And we'll talk some more about that in infrastructure. The amount of money collected just through tariffs meaning taxes on imported goods, results in about $500 billion in revenues for world governments. With the World Trade Organization, we're supposed to be bringing down these trade barriers, bringing down these duties. But when you have $2 trillion in logistics investment and $500 billion in revenues just because of taxes, it lets you know how important international trade is to these governments. This is big business. And finally, and I love this picture, in supply chain management, we all do not know what's going past the international barriers. We don't know what our customers are doing domestically or internationally. We're not really sure of the motivations of our domestic or international suppliers. The key, though, is not knowing everything. The key is knowing the questions to ask, to understand things a little bit better, to bring that water level down to give you a strategic or a competitive advantage. So, supply chain management and understanding it isn't about having all the right answers. It's asking the right questions. And hopefully through this course, we're going to go through each of the chapters, the key subject matters, and think of questions we may want to ask in a meeting with our clients, with our suppliers, with our colleagues that helps us get and make the best decision. Thanks.